This episode of The Deep Dive is brought to you by Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. A series of AI-narrated meditations designed to feed your intellect and challenge conventional wisdom.
Yes.
Each bite-sized episode is packed with thought-provoking ideas, surprising facts, and insightful analysis, all designed to spark your curiosity and expand your understanding of the world. Ever feel like you're just drowning in opinions these days, but also you're so thirsty for actual truth?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're talking about today, diving in to Mortimer J. Adler's 6 great ideas.
It's a good one.
It is a good one, and trust me, this is way more than just dusty old philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
This is about how we understand the world, the choices we make, and even what it even means to live a good life.
Yeah, you know what Adler does so brilliantly is that he breaks down these huge complex ideas into concepts we can actually wrap our heads around.
Yeah.
It gives us a framework, a set of tools for thinking about things like truth, justice, liberty, all those big things we argue about all the time but maybe haven't really sat down and examined.
Okay, so let's start with truth, because
Yeah.
honestly, in this age of fake news and everyone having their own truth, it just feels more slippery than ever.
Right? Yeah.
Adler says there's a difference between subjective and objective truth.
Yes.
Is he saying that my love for spicy pickles is less real than the law of gravity?
Yeah. Well, not exactly. He's not dismissing subjective experiences.
Right.
What he's saying is there's a difference between what's true for you, like those spicy pickles,
Okay.
and what's true regardless of what anyone thinks or believes.
Hmm.
Gravity works, whether you believe in it or not. That's objective truth.
So how do we even figure out what's objectively true? Is it all just science and hard facts?
Well, he uses the example of a jury trial, which is a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
You have this group of people presented with evidence. They hear all these different perspectives.
Right.
And they're supposed to reach a verdict based on what actually happened,
Right.
not just what they feel or their opinions.
Yeah.
That's the goal, to get at the most objective truth possible.
But what about things that can't be proven definitively? What about history or art? Is there even such a thing as objective truth when it comes to those areas?
Right. So this is where his idea of the sphere of truth comes in. He argues that there are some areas where objective truth is attainable, or at least we can get closer to it, through evidence, through reasoning.
Mm.
But then there's also the sphere of taste,
Okay.
where personal preference kind of reigns supreme.
So arguing about whether Picasso was a genius or a hack, that falls outside of the sphere of truth?
Exactly.
There's no right answer.
Yeah, you can make arguments based on artistic principles, historical context, all that stuff. But ultimately, whether you like Picasso or not, that's subjective.
Right.
And he says that's okay. Recognizing that difference can actually save us a lot of pointless arguments.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I can already see how this is helpful. It helps us understand why some debates are never going to be settled.
Exactly.
But let's move on to another big one, justice.
Oh, yeah.
Feels like everyone's talking about justice these days, but they rarely define what they actually mean by it.
It's a big one. What he sees it as the ultimate regulator. It's the principle that helps us balance individual liberty with the needs of society. And he really argues that justice cannot exist without equality and vice versa.
Okay, so that makes sense, but also feels kind of idealistic.
Sure.
The world doesn't always feel very just or equal.
Right.
So how do we actually apply this concept in a way that makes a difference?
Well, he gets really specific here. He breaks justice down into 3 types:
Okay.
commutative, distributive, and contributive. So commutative justice is all about fairness in one-on-one dealings, like contracts or agreements.
Okay.
It's really the foundation of how we interact with each other in a fair way.
So if I borrow money from you, commutative justice says I need to pay you back.
Exactly.
It's about honoring our agreements.
Honoring our agreements. And then there's distributive justice, which is about how society as a whole distributes its goods and burdens fairly.
Okay.
So that's everything, like taxes to access to healthcare, even opportunities for education. These are all areas where we need to think about distributive justice.
Right. And that's where things get really politically charged,
Yeah.
right? Because people have very different ideas about what a fair distribution looks like.
Oh, absolutely. But again, his framework gives us a way to have those debates in a productive way.
Yeah.
It forces us to move past just slogans and to actually consider the principles at play.
Okay, so we've got fairness in our personal dealings, fairness in how society allocates resources. What's the third type?
Contributive justice.
Okay.
This is all about each person's duty to contribute to the good of society as a whole.
Okay.
It's that idea that we each have a responsibility to participate in a way that benefits not just ourselves, but the entire community.
So like paying taxes is part of it, but it's also about like being an active and engaged citizen,
Yeah.
voting, volunteering, speaking out against injustice.
All of that. And he makes a crucial point here.
Okay.
He argues that laws have to be grounded in natural justice,
Okay.
in principles that are tied to human nature itself.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're just rules imposed by whoever's in power, and they lose their moral legitimacy.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thought. So like, if a law doesn't align with our like understanding of what's fundamentally right or wrong,
Right. It's not truly just.
that's his argument.
Okay.
And this leads us into the next big idea, liberty.
Ooh.
Because what good is freedom if it isn't grounded in that sense of justice? You know, it's interesting. We often talk about justice, liberty as if they're like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
But Adler actually goes deeper and shows us just how complex that relationship really is.
So he doesn't just like go with the freedom, good restrictions, bad thing, because I feel like that's what we hear a lot these days.
Right. He goes way beyond that. He identifies three distinct types of freedom:
Oh, okay.
natural freedom, acquired freedom, and circumstantial freedom.
Okay, so unpack those for me. What is natural freedom?
So natural freedom, it's that like inherent potential we all have to make choices.
Okay.
We're not robots pre-programmed with a set path.
Right.
We have the capacity to choose, and that's really what sets us apart.
But like, does that mean a baby has natural freedom? I mean, they can't exactly make rational choices yet.
Well, that's where acquired freedom comes in.
This is the freedom to make good choices. Ones that are aligned with reason, virtue, our understanding of what's truly good for us. And this kind of freedom, it takes effort.
Right.
It takes learning. It takes moral development. It's something that we cultivate over time.
So it's not just about having choices, but like developing the wisdom to choose well.
Exactly.
Okay, that adds a whole other dimension to it.
And then finally, there's circumstantial freedom, which is the freedom to actually act on our choices in the real world.
Okay.
And this is where things get a little tricky.
Right.
Because obviously your freedom can't infringe on the rights of others.
Right.
There have to be boundaries.
Like that old saying, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins.
Exactly. So circumstantial freedom is always going to be limited by the context we're in, by the rights and freedoms of those around us.
So true freedom isn't just about doing whatever you want whenever you want. It's about like navigating those boundaries responsibly.
I think that's a great way to put it.
It's a lot more nuanced than we usually hear.
It really is. And this brings us to another crucial distinction he makes, the difference between liberty and license.
Okay.
So license is essentially freedom without responsibility. It's acting on impulse without considering the consequences for yourself or others.
Got it.
True liberty, on the other hand, is guided by reason and a sense of justice.
Okay, so it's not freedom versus rules. It's about understanding that true freedom requires a framework of responsibility,
Yeah.
a commitment to acting in a way that respects the freedom of others.
I think that's a really good way to sum it up. And that framework is where equality comes in, because without a commitment to equality, how can we truly ensure that everyone has the opportunity to exercise their liberty, to develop that acquired freedom, to act within the bounds of circumstantial freedom?
Right, that's where it all ties together. Right?
Yeah.
Justice, liberty, equality, they're all kind of intertwined.
They really are. But he doesn't just throw out the word equality and leave it at that. He digs deeper. He explores the different dimensions of equality.
Okay.
And he talks about equality in kind and equality in degree.
So equality in kind is that like saying we're all human beings regardless of our differences. We have that same fundamental worth.
You got it. It's that inherent dignity we possess simply by being human. It's the foundation of any just society.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's equality in degree, and that's where things get a little more complicated.
Yeah, because people are different. We have different talents, abilities, circumstances. We don't all start at the same place, and we don't all end up in the same place.
Absolutely. And so that's the tension. How do we balance that inherent equality in kind with the reality of inequality in degree?
So he wouldn't say that everyone should have the same amount of wealth or the same level of success.
No, he wouldn't. In fact, he argues that some degree of inequality is actually necessary.
Okay.
It incentivizes contributions, acknowledges differences in merit. It's like, you think about a sports competition. You want everyone to have a fair chance to compete, but you also recognize that the most talented athletes are naturally going to rise to the top.
So it's not about eliminating all differences, but it's about creating a system where everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive.
That's a great way to put it.
But how do you define thriving?
Well, that brings us to the concept of goodness,
Okay.
which Adler argues is just as fundamental as truth. Just like there's objective truth, there's objective goodness.
So it's not just about what feels good to me personally, it's about what is truly good for human beings. Like, are there certain things that are universally good regardless of what we as individuals might want?
He says yes. He makes a really important distinction between real goods and apparent goods.
Okay.
So real goods are things that are genuinely good for us based on our nature as human beings. They contribute to our well-being, our flourishing.
Okay.
Things like health knowledge, friendship, meaningful work.
Okay. Those all make sense. And apparent goods are things that we might want or desire, but they don't actually contribute to our true happiness.
Exactly. Think about those things that are tempting but ultimately unsatisfying. Fleeting pleasures, superficial status symbols, possessions that don't truly enrich our lives.
This is making me really rethink my to-do list.
Right.
I can see how aligning our desires with those real goods could lead to a more fulfilling life, even if it means letting go of some of those apparent goods that we're constantly bombarded with.
And that leads us to the ultimate goal, what he calls the totem bonum.
The totem bonum.
The totem bonum. It's the highest good, the complete package of a life well lived.
Okay.
He argues that true happiness isn't just about getting what you want, but it's about cultivating those real goods, those things that contribute to our well-being as human beings.
So it's not about maximizing pleasure. It's about living in a way that nourishes our minds, our bodies, and our spirits.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of virtue comes in.
Yeah.
Virtue for Adler is about developing those good habits that help us make choices that lead to those real goods.
Okay.
Even when those choices are difficult or they require sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's about aligning our desires with what is truly good for us.
So instead of asking, what do I want? We should be asking, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to live?
Those are the questions that lead us towards the totem bonum. And it's a lifelong journey. It's a constant process of self-reflection and growth.
Okay, my mind is blown wide open right now.
Yeah.
We've covered truth, justice, liberty, equality, goodness. There's still one more big idea on his list, right? And this might be the most elusive of them all. Beauty.
Yeah. And this is where things get really interesting because he argues that beauty isn't just about aesthetics.
Okay.
It's not just about what pleases the eye or the ear. It's about a kind of truth,
Wow.
a glimpse into a deeper reality. But before we dive into that, let's take a pause here
Okay.
and continue our exploration of beauty in the next part of our deep dive.
This episode of The Deep Dive is brought to you by Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. A series of AI-narrated meditations designed to feed your intellect and challenge conventional wisdom.
Yes.
Each bite-sized episode is packed with thought-provoking ideas, surprising facts, and insightful analysis, all designed to spark your curiosity and expand your understanding of the world. All right, so we're back and ready to tackle the final piece of this philosophical puzzle. Beauty. We've talked about truth, justice, liberty, equality, even goodness. But beauty often feels like the most subjective of them all. Is Adler saying that there's like some objective standard for beauty? Like some universal rule book for what's considered beautiful?
Well, it's not quite that simple. He acknowledges that subjective element of beauty, that personal experience of like joy, wonder, awe that we feel when we encounter something beautiful.
Yeah.
Think about listening to a piece of music that moves you deeply or like gazing up at a breathtaking sunset.
Right.
That emotional response is undeniably real and valid.
So that's the beauty's in the eye of the beholder part.
Right.
But I have a feeling he doesn't stop there.
You're right. He also introduces the concept of admirable beauty, and this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So admirable beauty goes beyond just personal taste.
Okay.
It's about those qualities that make something objectively worthy of admiration, even if not everyone finds it personally pleasing.
So are we talking about things that are like technically well-crafted, like a
Mhm.
perfectly cut diamond or a flawlessly executed dance routine?
That's part of it, yeah. He says things like unity, clarity, coherence, all those things can be objectively assessed in works of art. Just
Yeah.
like you can judge the skill of a master craftsman.
Right.
Think about a beautifully written poem or a painting with perfect composition and use of color. Even if you don't personally connect with the subject matter, you can still appreciate the artistry, the mastery of technique.
Yeah, this is making me think about those times when I've gone to like an art museum and I'm standing in front of this like world famous painting and just like, I don't get it.
Right.
Maybe I was missing that admirable beauty even if I couldn't articulate what it was.
And that's the beauty of it, pun intended. He doesn't give us a rigid formula for identifying admirable beauty.
Hmm.
He leaves room for that mystery, for that ongoing exploration and debate.
Yeah.
But he does suggest that our appreciation of beauty can be cultivated, can be refined, just like any other skill.
So it's like developing your palate for fine wine or learning to appreciate different genres of music.
Exactly.
The more you expose yourself to beauty in its various forms, the more you're able to perceive those deeper qualities.
I think that's a great way to put it. And this is where that connection between truth, goodness, and beauty becomes really fascinating.
Okay.
Because he suggests that true beauty is a kind of truth, a reflection of like a higher order, a harmony. He even goes so far as to say that the contemplation of beauty can lead us closer to the divine.
Wow. Okay. So beauty isn't just about aesthetics. It's about a deeper understanding of the world, a glimpse into something transcendent. That's a pretty profound idea.
It is. And it brings us full circle back to the beginning of our conversation.
Okay.
Back to that concept of truth. Because ultimately, he believed that the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty are all intertwined. They're not separate endeavors. They're different facets of that same human quest for meaning and understanding.
So after this deep dive into Adler's 6 great ideas, what's the takeaway? What do you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think for me, it's the realization that these ideas, they're not just abstract concepts. They're tools for living a more thoughtful, a more engaged, a more fulfilling life. They challenge us to examine our assumptions, to think critically about the world around us, and to make choices that align with our values.
Like he's given us a roadmap, not to like a specific destination, but to a journey of self-discovery and growth.
Exactly. And it's a journey that requires that constant questioning, that exploration, a willingness to embrace the complexity. Because as Adler reminds us, the pursuit of these great ideas, it's not about finding easy answers. It's about engaging in a lifelong conversation with ourselves and with the world around us.
And if you're feeling inspired to join that conversation, we highly recommend checking out Mortimer J. Adler's 6 Great Ideas. It's a book that will challenge you, it will provoke you, it may even change the way you see the world.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more thought-provoking explorations of the ideas that shape our world. We'll be back next week with a brand new topic, so stay tuned.
And remember, keep thinking critically, keep questioning, and never stop searching for those moments of beauty, truth, and goodness wherever you may find them.
And that's a wrap for this week's deep dive. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends and visit insert link to purchase Adler's 6 Great Ideas to continue exploring these powerful concepts.